What if Abraham killed Isaac? The wind howls atop Mount Moriah. The sun burns overhead, casting long shadows over the ancient stones. A frail but resolute old man stands over a bound boy, his own son, his only son. Abraham grips the knife. His hands tremble, but his face is set like stone. Isaac, bound upon the altar, looks up at his father with wide, terrified eyes. He does not struggle. He does not scream. He only waits. A voice has commanded this, a test beyond all understanding, a sacrifice greater than any before it. Abraham clenches his jaw and raises the blade high. A pause, a breath. Then he brings the knife down, and the boy stops breathing. But this time, no voice calls out. No angel stops him. The silence is deafening. The real story, what was meant to happen. The Bible tells us that God tested Abraham's faith, commanding him to sacrifice his son, Isaac. It was an unthinkable request. Yet Abraham obeyed without hesitation. He traveled for 3 days, climbed Mount Moriah, built an altar, and prepared to carry out the sacrifice. But at the last moment, God intervened. Genesis 22, verse 12. Do not lay a hand on the boy, the angel of the Lord called out. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. A ram was provided, and Abraham's faith was proven. Isaac lived. Abraham was blessed. And from Isaac came Jacob, then the 12 tribes of Israel. A moment of faith changed the course of history. But what if there was no voice? No intervention? What if Abraham actually killed Isaac? The what if scenario, a world without Isaac. The smell of blood lingers in the air. The old man stares at his trembling hands, still clutching the dagger. The boy is gone. His chest no longer rises and falls. And God is silent. 1. Abraham's broken spirit. Abraham stumbles backward. His heart is pounding. This was a test, wasn't it? He looks to the sky, expecting a voice, a sign, a ram in the thicket. But nothing comes. Did he misunderstand? Was this truly what God wanted? He returns home to Sarah, who has waited anxiously. When she sees Abraham arrive alone, she rushes to him. "Where's my son?" she asks, her voice tight with fear. Abraham cannot answer. He collapses to the ground. When Sarah learns the truth, she screams. The tent shakes with her wailing. She rips at her clothes, falls to the ground, and refuses to eat for days. Soon after, Sarah dies. The weight of losing her only son is too much to bear. 2. No Jacob, no Israel. Isaac was a promised son. He was meant to be the father of Jacob, the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. Without Isaac, there is no Israel. God's covenant with Abraham was built on Isaac's future. If he is dead, then everything falls apart. Does God choose another man, another bloodline, or does mankind lose its connection to God forever? 3. Abraham's isolation and God's silence. After Isaac's death, Abraham becomes a shadow of his former self. He walks the land as a broken man. He wonders, was it all a mistake? He waits for God to speak, but God never speaks again. Perhaps this was the real test. Not whether Abraham would kill Isaac, but whether he would believe in God's mercy. And he failed. Imagine a man today, standing over his son with a knife, claiming that God told him to do it. He would not be seen as a man of faith. He would be seen as a murderer. The police would arrest him. He would be locked away, labeled a fanatic, a madman. In the modern world, faith is questioned, doubted, examined through science and reason. People no longer accept voices in the sky as unquestionable truth. If Abraham lived today, would he have even considered obeying such a command? Or would he have thought he was losing his mind? And if God really had stopped him in our time, would people believe it was divine intervention or just luck? The world has changed. Faith is tested in different ways. But the lesson remains. God never wanted Isaac to die. He wanted to see if Abraham believed in mercy more than sacrifice. If Abraham had killed Isaac, history would have changed forever. It wasn't just about obedience. It was about trusting that God never intended harm. Today, we face different tests of faith. Maybe it's not a voice telling us to sacrifice a child, But maybe it's a situation where we think God is asking the impossible. Maybe we feel we have to sacrifice our morals, our peace, or even our relationships to prove our faith. But this story reminds us, God provides a way out. Always, the test is not just an obedience. It's a knowing who God is, and He is a God of mercy. The sun blazes overhead as Abraham descends Mount Moriah, his feet dragging over jagged stone. The knife, still stained with his son's blood, hangs at his side. Isaac is gone, his lifeless body left behind on the altar, his sacrifice complete. But there is no triumph in Abraham's heart, only silence. Sarah's face flashes in his mind. How will he tell her? How will he tell her that the son she bore in her old age, the son promised by God, was given back to the same God in death? And worse, why did God not stop him? Something is wrong. The heavens feel colder. The ground beneath his feet feels heavier. The weight of his obedience crushes him like an iron yoke. He had marched up that mountain like a soldier, unquestioning, unwavering. Now, he marches down like a man without a soul, and God is silent. When Abraham returns home, Sarah greets him with hopeful eyes, but she does not see Isaac. Her breath catches. Her hands tremble. "Where is my son?" she whispers. Abraham cannot answer. His throat is dry. The words will not come. Sarah steps forward, gripping his arms, shaking him. Where is he? Tears fill Abraham's eyes. His lips part, and a whisper escapes. Barely a sound. He is gone. Sarah stumbles back, her face contorting in horror. She lets out a wail so piercing that the servants stop in their work, turning toward the tent in shock. The ground beneath her collapses. Sarah refuses to eat, refuses to drink, refuses to live. Days later, she is found lying in her tent, her breath shallow, her body frail. Her lips move as if speaking, but no words come. Then, silence. Sarah is dead. Abraham kneels beside her lifeless body, gripping her cold hand. He has lost his son. Now he has lost his wife. And still, God does not speak. Abraham, once the chosen man of God, the father of nations, is now a man alone. There is no Isaac, no Jacob, no 12 tribes of Israel. Without Isaac, the bloodline promised by God has ended before it could begin. The land of Canaan, once foretold as the inheritance of Abraham's descendants, remains untouched by his name. The world shifts, reshapes. History bends into something unrecognizable. Without Israel, there is no King David, no temple in Jerusalem, no Messiah. The great war between kingdoms, the rise of prophets, the exile to Babylon, the return of a remnant, all of it ceases to exist. The world remains lost in the chaos of its own sin. And Abraham, he vanishes from history, his name buried beneath the sands of time, a forgotten man who once held a promise, but lost it with a single stroke of a knife. Years pass. Abraham, now an old man, sits outside his tent beneath a starless sky. Once, he had looked at these heavens and seen God's promise written in their vastness. 1,000 stars, each one representing a descendant that would come from his line. Now the sky feels empty, and so does he. He has not heard from God since that day. Perhaps he never will again. Then, something stirs in the wind. A whisper, not a voice, but something close. "You did not trust me." Abraham closes his eyes. Was that real? Or just a thought? It does not matter. The damage is done. And the stars above, once shining with hope, remain cold and distant. The night swallows him whole. But in another world, in a world that was meant to be, Abraham stood on that mountain with a knife in his hand, his son bound before him. He heard God's voice, but something in him held steady. Faith, a faith that whispered, God will provide. And at the last moment, a ram appeared. God stopped the blade. Because the test was never about taking Isaac's life. It was about whether Abraham truly believed that God would not break his promise. And because he did, history unfolded as it should. Isaac lived, Jacob was born, Israel became a nation. And thousands of years later, on another hill, God himself would send his own son as a final sacrifice, because Abraham's faith had paved the way. If Abraham had killed Isaac, Christianity would never have existed. But because he had faith, the story of salvation was written through his lineage. His faith led to the coming of Jesus Christ, who became the ultimate sacrifice for all mankind. This story reminds us that faith is not just obedience, it is trust. Faith means believing that God will provide, even when we see no way out. And because Abraham believed, we have a Savior today. What if one decision changed the course of history forever? If you love deep, thought-provoking biblical what-ifs, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an episode. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Abraham's place?